I am joined by the amazing Kerry Washington. Kerry, thank you for joining me on Defending Democracy.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I have been waiting and waiting and waiting all month for this moment. I am a
Me
fan
too.
of yours.
You know,
and,
I'm a huge
and
Marc
so,
Elias fan.
so thank you. Let me jump in because you have been traveling literally all over the country over the last few months, and you're heading out the final weekend before the election. So, I'm really curious to hear both kind of what you've been up to, but also like, what are you hearing? Like, what are people saying out there?
Yeah, I've been in Michigan and Arizona and Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. I'm going out to North Carolina this weekend for the final stretch, and wherever else I can find to go. um, and it's been really great because I've been really doing kind of door to door knocking, also speaking at big volunteer events, talking to a lot of local small business owners. And I really have been hearing how ready people are for change, how much is at stake for people in this election. Like when you're really on the ground, either with the campaign or with a handful of grassroots organizations that I have worked with through the years in different states. For me, it's really exciting to see democracy in action because politics is not about, as you know, like this one person who's in control making power, at least not in a democracy, right? Politics is about people engaging. And you see that, when I was in Wisconsin, there were so many volunteers who had driven in from Illinois, from the Chicago area. And, people are really, really kind of, to borrow an old Obama phrase, fired up about what's at stake, and also really up and down the ballot. That's been really interesting in these travels, that people are aware that it's not just the presidential race, that there are all these local races, whether it's Senate or Congress or judges, sheriffs, that there are so many elections that really matter.
Okay, so I'm not going to ask what it must be like when someone opens the door and Kerry Washington is on their porch. I'm sure you get do people are like, wait, are that really you? Or
It varies, right? Like sometimes people go into an immediate state of shock, but I actually had one woman in Philly who didn't recognize me, and she was like, "I'm certainly not going to do something just because some celebrity tells me to do it." And then I was like, "Okay," and it was this really incredible conversation where I was able to kind of ask her about the issues that matter to her and let her know why I felt that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz would be better change makers and solution givers um, than who she was thinking about, or really thinking about not voting. And when we left, her daughter came out the door and was like, "Just so you know, I'm a really big fan." And I was like, "Well, don't tell your mom because your mom doesn't want to do what celebrities say to do," which I thought was really fun. But yeah, it's really exciting because I don't do this work as a celebrity, right? Like I'm out here canvassing and volunteering because I'm an American, because I care, because I'm a mom who has daughters who have fewer reproductive rights than I had when I was their age. I'm a mom of a son who I want to have better opportunities than I had when I was a kid. I'm here as a daughter because I have parents who, need healthcare now more than ever. I'm here as a granddaughter of immigrants. I'm out here as an ally to the LGBTQIA plus community. Like I'm out here not because I'm Kerry Washington, but because I'm like Carrie from the Bronx, like the kid who grew up in a working class family, who was able to in many ways like run after the American dream, and I shouldn't be the exception. I shouldn't be like one of the only people out of the neighborhood that makes it out. Our trajectory and our opportunities shouldn't be curtailed based on our race or our gender or the zip code that we're born into. And those are qualities those are values, ideals that I believe in. And so I'm out trying to support candidates who share those values.
so you mentioned that people bring their own individual concerns to these conversations.
Mm.
And I'm really curious, like in all of your conversations with the voters, what are people saying they are worried about? Like what are the issues that seem to be motivating?
So, one that I didn't expect to hear as much as I'm hearing is people are worried about democracy itself. And they may not say it in those terms, but people are like, I've heard this man talk about wanting to be a dictator on day one. And I've heard this man talk about wanting generals that are more like Hitler's generals. And I'm getting wind that they want to take away access to voting rights. And so, people are concerned about democracy itself, about the right to vote and to have a voice in government. And that's really important. The thing I'm hearing about more than anything is reproductive rights. And even in states where there are state protections for reproductive rights, people understand that if there is a federal ban, that would trump any state's rights. And so, places like Pennsylvania has voted to protect their right to choose. But if there are federal rules in place that supersede those laws, then they will not get the government that they voted for. So reproductive rights is a big one. And the economy is huge. Like that's an issue. I think people are talking a lot about how the Harris-Walz campaign wants to provide more affordable housing, wants to cut red tape for entrepreneurs, wants to provide better tax credits. So there's a real understanding of how much a Trump administration would cost the average family, $4,000 a year. And even like kind of the more recent comments that, fixing the economy would be terrible in the immediate future, like warning people so anyway, the economy is a big one for folks. And I think that that's with good reason, that people want to be able to lower the cost of groceries and have better access to affordable housing. Those things are so important and something I think worth fighting for.
So I know you've done this before for other campaigns, and it must mean you enjoy it at some level. How does it feel the same, and how does it feel different?
Huh. I think one of the things, and this is important for people to keep in mind in these final days where you have the opportunity to talk to people who might be undecided or who might be thinking about not voting. Something that's gotten really clear for me this time around, and maybe this is always true, but I'm really experiencing it these days, is that people really want to be listened to. I think too often when we are talking to somebody we love about voting, we want to like lecture at them and tell them what the right thing is to do and even shame people into voting. And I just don't think that works. I think that to me, voting is really an act of love. Like I always say to people, you don't even like, I love Kamala Harris. I know her well. I have voted for her in many elections. I voted for her for Attorney General. I voted for her for the Senate. I voted for her for Vice President. Living in California, I've known her as my politician, but I also know her personally and I adore her. You don't have to love her. Like people, you don't have to love a politician.
I do, by the way,
Yes.
love Kamala
Well, so to
also
your
personally.
listener, if you don't love her,
Right.
all I ask is that people love themselves enough and love their family and community enough to show up and vote for the folks who are going to do right by them. And so that for me is a big piece of what's important in this moment, that we have to listen to people, not lecture at people, but say to people like, what is it that you care about? What is the issue that is on your heart? Because I am so confident, so confident that whether what you care about is reasonable gun control, the environment, having safe education or quality education, healthcare, the economy, reproductive rights, whatever it is, democracy itself, whatever it is that you care about, the Harris-Walz plan is going to be much better than concepts of a plan. Like, I guarantee you that that's true. And so when we can take the time to be patient and listen to folks about what it is they care about, then we can help share the information that they need most, not what we think is important, but what they think is important, and help people understand that there's so much at stake But what's most important is that they can use their vote as an opportunity to take better care of themselves and their family and friends. The people, places, and things that they care about most can be empowered through voting. I think the other big thing is that this time around, people feel more aware than ever before that the election is not going to be decided on election day. And that feels super duper important and great, that people know that we're going to have a little bit of patience, that this is going to be a process. Like, I think we are understanding now more than ever before that this is an election season, that voting, that early voting really matters and is really important, and that post-election day is a process that we are figuring out. Can I ask you some of the questions that I've been hearing actually from folks out in the
Absolutely.
world? Okay, great. So to that end, what should we expect on election night? Like, I know we won't have an answer that night, but what should we be expecting? What should we look for, and what do we think we'll get?
Yeah. So look, I think that there is a little bit of rose-colored glasses about the past. The fact is, we oftentimes don't know the results of elections on election night. We've become sort of because President Obama won landslides, frankly, in 2008 and 2012, we did have early election results. But remember, in 2000, it took days before people knew that what was going on in Florida, and then that took a long time. So on election night, we will get the unofficial results. So the Associated Press and other news outlets will go to county offices around the country and collect the numbers that essentially go from the local polling place to the county offices. So when you go, you vote in person at a local polling place. At the end of the night, they transmit the numbers of votes for each candidate on the machines. Some places they call it in, some places it's done electronically, but they send that to the counties, and then the counties tabulate those. And so what the media is reporting on election night are those unofficial results. These are the numbers, the preliminary numbers that have been called in. And in some states, that will be enough for the news outlets to call the race. So, for example, in California, I think they will feel pretty confident,
Yeah.
almost immediately calling the race for Kamala Harris. And in Alabama, they will probably feel confident almost immediately calling the race for Donald Trump. In other states, they want to get more of those results to see whether it is matching the historical patterns or not, before they start unofficially calling the results. But the other thing is, obviously, not all of the votes will be counted on election night.
Right.
And so, that takes a little bit of time as well.
So when will we know?
So, look, I think the fact is that it will depend on each state. So there are some states that count their ballots, almost all of them get counted on election night. Florida, for example, counts their ballots very, very fast. California, on the other hand, tends to count their ballots relatively slowly, and that's because mail-in ballots can come in later. In states with vote by mail, Washington, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, you tend to have later election results because you get so many mail-in ballots that come in. And remember, in 2020, it wasn't until the Saturday after the election that the race was officially called for Joe Biden. Now, I think people had a pretty good sense of what the outcome was, probably by Thursday and certainly into Friday. But people just have to be a little bit patient and let that process play out.
Can you talk a little bit about this thing that people are starting to talk about, the red mirage on election night? Like, what does that mean, and what should we be looking out for and aware of? And
Yeah, so this is one of these things that is an unfortunate byproduct of Donald Trump being on the ballot, because it has always been the case that the raw vote totals come in at different times and at different speeds. In some places in America, the cities report fast. In some places in America, the cities report slower. In some places, some counties move faster. In some counties, others. In some states, they count the mail-in ballots first. In some places, they count the mail-in ballots last. And historically, this just didn't cause anyone any concern. What we saw in the run up to 2020 and then in 2020 was that in a number of the important swing states, like, for example, Pennsylvania, they don't count the mail ballots until the end. So what you have is the earliest results you come in are the in-person votes, and therefore those votes look very Republican. And in normal times, such as they are, that didn't matter because everyone agreed, okay, well, we know the first returns are going to come from red areas or from in-person voting. And what we're going to gauge those against is past results from those locations. So are these results better or worse than they were in the past? In 2020, Donald Trump, because he wanted to prematurely claim victory and he wanted to create a sense that he was cheated when he wasn't, is he said, aha, look at all the red votes, and there were these late data dumps of ballots in the middle of the night. No, those weren't late data dumps of ballots in the middle of the night. It's just those ballots that were in some of the big cities or that were cast by mail ordinarily come in later. That was expected, but he treated it as some kind of conspiracy. And I might add, Kerry, he and a number of people associated with him have faced civil and criminal consequences for a lot of the disinformation and misinformation. And, there have been some really unfortunate circumstances in which election workers who did everything right have been the victims of that.
And what do you think we're going to see post-election, right? Like, can we talk about kind of the lawsuits and what we should be prepared for in that waiting period post-election?
Yeah. I want everyone to first start with what is normal. Okay. What is normal is that after elections, Democrats and Republican election officials come together and they shake hands and they congratulate each other on a job well done. Right? That's normal, right? Normal is that we do not assume that immediately upon the election being over, one candidate is going to falsely claim that he won and that he is then going to attack election officials, or as we see, he's already attacking election officials. Like, this is an abnormal time.
Like,
and we should not
Trump has already
that.
tweeted that there's cheating happening in Pennsylvania. Correct. Is like, what are you talking about? What cheating? And by who? What are...
Correct. Yeah. And so this isn't normal, Kerry. And it is really bad for democracy because there is something almost majestic about the way in which elections in America have happened, which is these local volunteers, the people who you see across the table from you when you check in to vote, who are working practically for nothing. Oftentimes they're older, and they're giving back to society in doing this. And there's one Democrat and one Republican, but when the election is over, they are proud of the work they have done. And they are not attacked for the work they have done. And so that is what's normal. What we should expect in 2024 is what we get from Donald Trump, which is, as you said, these sort of fantastical claims of fraud even before the election's over, probably lies about the election results even before the results are in. And then litigation. We've already seen a deluge of litigation from Republicans before the ballots have been cast, already claiming that there are non-citizens voting and that there need to be mass purges of voters. And so, we should expect that we may see that after the election. But the good news is we saw that in 2020 and it failed. And we have seen it before the election in 2024, and it's mostly failing. And we will see it afterwards, probably by Donald Trump, and it will fail again. So people need to have confidence that if they vote, they need to tune out the noise that comes with Donald Trump.
But are our structures ready for this kind of challenge? Are our legislative structures and judicial branches of government ready to meet the challenge of what is so abnormal in this moment?
Right. I think a lot of people, that's one of the biggest questions I get, right? People are worried, like, are the systems going to hold? And there is no doubt that the system of administration of election in this country has been under enormous pressure and strain. It used to be, like I said, that it was a point of civic pride for people to volunteer or work at polls, and now they see on TV what goes on, and it has put a lot of stress and strain on that. But so far, millions, by the time people watch this video, millions of Americans have already voted. Tens of millions of Americans have already voted. And we are having a successful election season. People are showing up to the polls. The polls are open. They are being staffed. People are voting by mail. People are voting early. And the system is holding. And I have every reason to believe the system will hold for 2024. And I have every reason to believe that the courts will continue to do their job in making sure that voters are not disenfranchised, that every lawful vote is counted, that Donald Trump cannot, intimidate and bluster his way through this process and have an impact on the vote total. But Kerry, I can't promise that we are going to forever be able to sustain the kinds of attacks that we have now witnessed for 8 years by this man. And so, let's hope that Kamala Harris wins. Let's hope that sort of sensibility is restored and that American democracy starts to heal. With only days until the 2024 election, Democracy Docket is trying something new, something it has never done before. Because we want to make sure you stay up to date on everything you need to know, Democracy Docket is offering a $20 off sale between now and Election Day for new members who join our premium program. You will get access to my tip sheet, my litigation look ahead, my news you missed, everything you need to know about what's happening to democracy in courts is available now for $20 off. Click on the link above or in the show notes.
What can we do as voters other than be patient and wait and donate to Democracy Docket as you continue to wage this war legislatively? But what else can we do as voters?
Yeah, so look, the most important thing people can do is have a plan to vote. Okay. Make sure you know what the method of voting is, even if you think because you've done it before. Rules change, laws change. Sometimes they change to the worse, and we've done a lot of coverage of how they gotten harder to vote, but sometimes, it gets better for people. New York voting laws got easier. It's easier to vote in New York. It's easier to vote in California.
Same in
It's
Michigan.
easier to vote in New York.
It's much easier to vote in
It's easier to vote in California. And so make sure you understand what the rules are. What do you need to bring voter ID? Is there something you need to do? And so have that plan and write it down or at least figure it out. And then have that conversation with your friends and your family. Make sure they understand the stakes of this election and that they know how they can participate in it. And most importantly, vote. At the end of the day, don't let the couch win. Make sure you actually turn out and vote, because your vote is your voice in a democracy. There's nothing more central to your power as a citizen of this great country than your ability to vote. And don't let anyone take that away from you. Don't let anyone tell you it doesn't matter. Don't let any of the cynics or the naysayers convince you that it doesn't matter if you vote. Don't let the chaos agents let you think it's going to be too complicated. I'm telling you, if you make a plan and you vote, your vote's going to count.
It must drive you crazy to hear people say that their votes don't count when you see every single day how much value voting has by the attacks on voting, right? People don't try to take something away that has no value. They're coming for voting rights because of how much power is in our right to vote.
That is exactly right. The fact is that the anti-voting forces in this country, they want people to become cynical about voting. They want them to lose confidence in voting. They want them to think their vote doesn't matter, because that's how they stay in power.
That's right.
The fact is that one thing we almost know for certain, Kerry, is that when all the votes are tallied, Kamala Harris is going to get more votes than Donald Trump. Now, it may, depending on the Electoral College, and the state allocations, it could be different. But there are folks who want to have the rules of voting be so complicated and so difficult that they can exercise majority power with a minority of the population. This is something Eric Holder talks eloquently about over and over again. What is gerrymandering about? It is about the use of the system so that a small minority can wield majority power over the majority. That minority can rule over the majority. And that's what, when we talk about voter suppression and we talk about telling people, convincing people not to vote, that's what they're doing. So don't give up your power, because if you vote, if everyone in this country votes, then we'll be okay as a democracy.
I love that. What can you talk a little bit about the certification process so that we understand, as we're being patient, and as we're, trusting in our systems and remaining hopeful? Like, what is the certification process? And also, I just learned about ballot curing. It's something I didn't know about. Will you talk about that too? Because I thought, oh, I guess I've been feeling like once election day happens, then all I can do is just sit back and be patient and wait. But there is more I can do.
There is. So, we talked about what results are reported on election night, and those are the unofficial results. That's what the AP, the Associated Press, and the newspapers get by calling the local county offices. But those are still unofficial results. So what happens is typically people go home and they get some sleep eventually, and then they come back the next day or the day after at the county level, and a board of local officials take all of those unofficial results and they give it another once over. They make sure that they didn't miss a precinct, they didn't miss a machine tape, that there
Right.
wasn't a transcription error. And all of those results are then put in a document, and then they're signed on a bipartisan basis. And that, at that point, the election is certified at the county level. Then those certificates are then sent to the state. The state then tallies them all up from the counties, and there's another bipartisan meeting typically. And now they may be put on a piece of parchment with calligraphy. And then that's sent to the governor. And then the governor has a signing ceremony and signs it. And now there's definitely calligraphy, and now there are ribbons. And those are the documents that go to the Electoral College and go to the House and the Senate. This is, Kerry, the pageantry of our democracy. It is the process by which everybody affirms and reaffirms that the math was right, that there were no ballots missed, that if people voted provisionally, that their ballots got included. And that is a process that, like I said, brings historically Democrats and Republicans together and makes everyone feel like, even if they didn't like the results, they had a part in the functioning of democracy. What we saw Donald Trump try to do in 2020 and then Republicans in 2022 is to target that pageantry of democracy, to try to exploit it and use this certification process to cast doubt on the outcome of the elections. And that's what we saw some extremists on the state election board in Georgia try to do in passing rules.
Yeah.
Those were struck down in court. So I think we're going to be okay there. With respect to ballot curing, there are some people who cast a mail-in ballot and they just made some technical error. They might have forgotten to sign the mail-in ballot, or they may not have made an error and the county may not be able to read their handwriting. And so there is, in many places, most places, an opportunity for the voter to get contacted and say, hey, we're not sure that this signature you put on the line matches the signature we have on file. Is this really you? And the voter says, yep, that's me. And then the ballot counts. And that's considered cured. Or it may be, you forgot to put the date next to your signature and the voter's like, oh, geez, I forgot to do that. I can just come down and add a date. And that's a cure, right? So it's an opportunity to fix these sort of small technical mistakes, or not even fix them, to tell the counties that actually it wasn't a mistake. Right. And then those ballots get counted as well. And that curing process is part of this certification.
So you can volunteer.
Absolutely. The campaign will have will be looking for people to help cure ballots. There are lots of civic groups, nonprofit organizations that do ballot curing activity. Hell, some counties look for volunteers to help them contact voters, right? Because election officials don't want people's ballots thrown out for no good reason, right? So there are lots of opportunities for people to get involved in the post-election to make sure that that every lawful vote gets counted and that people don't get disenfranchised over small technical issues.
And as we talk about the importance of down ballot races, how important is Congress to this certification process? Like, are we able to vote for people down ballot in Congress that will help this transition or this process go more smoothly?
Absolutely. So the as we all unfortunately witnessed in 2021 on January 6th, Congress plays a pivotal role in the certification process. I mean, Congress plays a pivotal role in everyone's lives. They pass legislation and that affects everyone's lives. And so when we talk about, passing voting rights legislation, that has to come through Congress. When we talk about enshrining in federal law protections for women's health, that would come from Congress. And so electing a good Congress is vitally important. But with respect to the certification, they are the ones who receive those pieces of paper that I mentioned that the governors all sign. It is those pieces of paper that the insurrectionists on January 6th were targeting. They were trying to prevent Congress from counting and certifying the election results on the basis of the results they'd received from the states. And it is ultimately Congress's job to accept those results and be the final step in the certification process. Unfortunately, we have seen a large number of Republican election deniers in Congress who have said they wouldn't certify the election in 2020, and they voted against certification even after the insurrection on January 6th. And there are a lot of them running for office in 2024 on a platform of saying they wouldn't have certified in 2020, and if Donald Trump doesn't win, they will refuse to certify again. So I don't want people to worry too much about it because there are safeguards to prevent that. But I'll tell you, electing Hakeem Jeffries, the next Speaker of the House, would go an awfully long way towards putting to rest this election denier movement in Congress and ensuring that that we have a smooth process on January 6, 2025.
God, this election really is about protecting democracy in so many ways, on so many levels, and so many offices.
Kerry, I want to ask you a question, which is that, you knock doors and hear from voters. You, I'm sure, get stopped on the street everywhere you go and people recognize you. And so I'm sure one of the big questions you get is the same question I get, which is, what is it that people can do? Like, what do you tell people when they say, okay, Kerry, you got me, I'm going to vote? What else can I be doing to be helpful?
Well, vote for candidates who believe in your values. Don't just vote, but make sure that you're voting for candidates and on measures that are going to protect you and your community. Vote early if you can. There are a lot of states where early voting is possible. Go vote early. It's really important. I was filling out my ballot last night. I was explaining all the ballot measures to my kids and asking them what they thought. Like, do they think that people who are in prison should be able to work and not get paid and be considered slaves, basically? And they were like, no. And like, do they want increased funding for housing, for affordable housing, and to help the unhoused? They were like, yes. So we were kind of, obviously I was voting on my own, but bringing them into that conversation. And I think that's really important because I think we also want to continue to encourage a culture of pride in our democracy and participation in our democracy. So vote with friends, make a plan, right? Vote early if you can. If you're voting by mail, drop off your ballot, drop it off. If you're voting in person, bring people with you. Bring friends and family members, because one of the things I say to people all the time is there's a lot of research around this that as Kerry Washington, if I encourage people to vote, like they pay attention, but they may not change their behavior, right? Like I'm good at raising awareness and I'm good at thanking people who can really make a difference, but the people who can really make a difference are close friends and family members. So if you have a cousin, a niece, a brother, a sister, a grandparent who's thinking about not voting, you have so much power in this moment. So persuade those friends, bring them with you to vote. If you've already voted, just like be a megaphone, because like I said, you have more power than I do in this moment. People always stop me in the street, Mark, actually, and say like, Olivia Pope, like, you have to fix this, you have to save us, and when like whatever the political crisis is. And I'm always like, Olivia Pope is not real. She can't vote. She can't make phone calls. She can't donate. She can't knock on doors. She can't do what you can do to help protect this democracy. So you have much more power than Olivia Pope. And I want people to know that this is a moment where you can combat misinformation. You can phone bank. You can just ask yourself every day, what more can I do? Postcards, phone calls, knocking on doors, and really like know how important you are in this moment. You could make a huge, huge, huge difference. And then, yeah, like you were saying, being patient on election day, once election day happens? What would you say to people, particularly about election day and afterward?
Yeah. So look, this is one of the reasons why I was so excited to talk to you and why I wanted to talk on this topic. Because, something you just said in your answer, like reminds me of my childhood, which is going with my parents
Mm,
to vote.
mm,
Like at that point it was all in person, but it was like literally, I remember
yeah.
going in New York,
Mm.
waiting online,
Did you go
and
behind the
the
curtain
old
thing? I
gray,
went behind the curtain
yes,
with my
the
mom.
old
Yeah,
gray machines with the curtains,
yeah.
and going behind, and my mother explaining to me, just like you just said you did. And it brought so much joy to the process. And I think the thing that is sometimes missing is that participating in democracy should be fun.
Yeah.
Like it's joyful. Like it is a moment of excitement, and making and restoring that and reflecting that is so important. And so what people can be doing, in my view, right now and after election day, is to celebrate democracy.
Mm,
Celebrate Kamala Harris. I'm celebrating Kamala Harris. I know you are, but also celebrate the down ballot candidates. Celebrate the
yeah.
fact that we live in this country and have an opportunity to pass on to our children, to explain to them, like, what do you think of this? And what do you think of that? And talk to our friends about it, not as a burden or as an obligation or as something we carry with us, but something we share and we celebrate with each other, because that shouldn't get lost in all of this. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, because you are so joyful about this. Kamala Harris is genuinely, for people who don't know her, she is
Yeah,
genuinely a joyful warrior,
yeah, she
and
truly
and
is.
so are you.
I think that's the other thing is that I think a lot of people are experiencing anxiety right now around this election. And I think you're right. Like the solution is to find the joy, because I feel like when I plug in with organizers, when I make those phone calls, when I knock on doors, when I'm in community with people who are doing this democracy work, I always feel better. I always feel more hopeful. I feel like because voting is really about having your voice and like saying to the world, I matter, that when you engage in the exercise of reminding people how much they matter, it looks and feels like love. Like it really does. It's like you like to say to your neighbor, you matter, your voice matters, the things you care about matter to me. Like that sounds like love. That is love in action. And so I love that. I love this kind of sense of community that comes around this time, like to hear from the volunteers who were driving in from other states to volunteer in swing states. It's just so selfless and beautiful and encouraging. I'm so excited about the fact that we are getting to talk to each other about democracy and to say this can be a source of joy and healing. And the answer to your anxiety is not just watching more cable news and like locking yourself in your bedroom and hiding under the covers and saying, I quit, I don't want to be in the game, it's too scary. I promise you that if you like plug in and make some phone calls and knock on doors, or even just bring cupcakes to the polling place because those polling volunteers need support, or bring potato chips to the campaign, the local campaign office, or donate $5 to a local race that's not getting a lot of attention right now. Any of those things will make you feel better. They really, really will. And voting will make you feel like you matter.
Well, Kerry, you have made us feel better. You have made us feel like we matter. You are amazing in every respect. And I am so thrilled you joined me today. And thank you for everything you're doing for democracy.
Oh my God,
It's really an
thank you.
inspiration.
You are another one of our joyful warriors. I'm so grateful for how you go in there and fight this fight legally, and also spread the gospel here. So thank you.
Thanks.